Picture your earliest happy memory. A birthday, a beach, a face leaning over your crib. It feels solid, real, unmistakably yours. But there is a real chance that pieces of it, maybe the whole thing, never actually happened the way you remember. That is not the failure of a tired brain. It is how memory works in everyone, all the time. Your mind is not a camera, and your past is not a recording locked safely away in a vault. It is a story you quietly rewrite every single time you remember it. So how much of your life are you genuinely recalling? And how much are you inventing without ever knowing? To even begin answering that, you have to let go of an idea you have carried since you were a child. The idea that remembering is like pressing play on a tape. It feels that way. When you reach for a memory, it seems to arrive whole, like a video pulled off a shelf. But back in 1932, a British psychologist named Frederick Bartlett showed that this is an illusion. He read people a strange, unfamiliar folk story, full of details that made no sense to them. Then asked them to retell it again and again over days and weeks. Something remarkable happened. With each retelling, the story changed. People dropped the parts that felt foreign. They added details that were never there. They quietly reshaped the tale until it matched what they already expected a story to be. Bartlett realized your memory does not store the past. It rebuilds it, every time, from a few real fragments and a lot of educated guessing. Think about what that means. Each time you remember your 10th birthday, you are not opening a file. You are constructing the scene fresh, filling the gaps with what probably happened, what usually happens, what you wish had happened. And then you save that new version over the old one. Does that frighten you a little? If it sounds like the gaps could be filled with almost anything, that is exactly what one scientist spent her career proving. Her name is Elizabeth Loftus, and she is the most important memory researcher alive. In 1974, she ran a now famous experiment with a colleague named John Palmer. They showed people a film of a car accident, then asked one simple question, with one word changed. Some were asked how fast the cars were going when they hit each other. Others, when they smashed into each other. That single word changed everything. The people who heard smashed estimated higher speeds. And a week later, when asked if they had seen broken glass in the film, the smashed group was far more likely to say yes. There was no broken glass. The word had reached back into their memory and added it. This is called the misinformation effect, and it is everywhere. A leading question, a friend's version of events, a headline, a single suggestive word can slip into your memory and become indistinguishable from the truth. You will not feel it happen. The false detail will feel exactly as real as the genuine ones, because to your brain, there is no difference. But changing a detail is one thing. Could someone plant an entire memory of something that never occurred at all? In 1995, Loftus set out to answer that with one of the boldest studies in psychology. She and a student gave volunteers short accounts of childhood events supposedly provided by their families. Most were true, but one was completely invented. A story about being lost in a shopping mall as a young child, frightened and crying, before being rescued by a kind stranger. It never happened to any of them. And yet, when asked about it later, around a quarter of the participants remembered it. Not vaguely. They described the mall. They described the stranger's face. They added details no one had given them, embroidering a memory of an event that had never taken place. Their past had been edited, and they had no idea. So why is your brain so easy to fool? Why would evolution build a memory system this unreliable? The answer lies in something discovered in 2000 by a neuroscientist named Karen Nader. For a long time, people assumed a memory, once formed, was fixed, like ink drying on a page. Nader showed the opposite. Every time you pull a memory back into your conscious mind, it briefly becomes unstable, chemically soft, editable. Before it can be stored again, your brain has to physically rebuild it, and in that moment, it can be changed. This is called reconsolidation, and it leads to a conclusion that feels almost backwards. The memories you revisit the most, the cherished ones, the ones you replay over and over, are the ones most rewritten. The story you have told 100 times is probably the least accurate one you own. Sit with that for a second. Now here is where it gets truly unsettling. Because surely you think, The big moments are safe. The shocking ones. The days so vivid you can still feel them. Surely those are burned in exactly as they happened. That is what almost everyone believes. And it is wrong. Psychologists call these intensely vivid recollections flashbulb memories. And a researcher named Ulrich Neisser tested them in a clever way. The morning after the Challenger space shuttle exploded in 1986, he had students write down exactly how they heard the news, where they were, who they were with. Then he waited. 2.5 years later, he asked the same people to describe that morning again. The results were stunning. Many gave accounts that were wildly different from what they had written down at the time. Wrong places, wrong people, wrong details. But here is the part that should stop you cold. They were absolutely certain they were right. When shown their own handwriting from years before, some refused to believe it. Their confidence had nothing to do with accuracy. The memory felt vivid, so it felt true. The two are not the same thing. Your brain does this constantly, in small ways, every day. In 1995, researchers Henry Roediger and Kathleen McDermott demonstrated it with a simple word list. They read people a string of related words: bed, rest, awake, tired, dream, night, and later asked what they had heard. People confidently recalled hearing the word sleep, but sleep was never on the list. Their minds had filled in the obvious gap and then handed it back as a genuine memory. You do not just forget things, you actively invent things that fit, and you cannot tell the inventions from the truth. This is not a harmless quirk. It has destroyed lives. For decades, the single most powerful evidence in a courtroom was an eyewitness pointing across the room and saying, "That is the person. I will never forget that face." Juries trusted it completely. But when DNA testing arrived and old convictions were re-examined, a horrifying pattern emerged. According to the Innocence Project, mistaken eyewitness identification played a role in more than 2/3 of the wrongful convictions later overturned by DNA evidence. Real people lost decades of their lives because a frightened, well-meaning witness remembered a face with total confidence and was completely wrong. The memory felt certain. It was fiction. So step back and look at what your memory actually is. Not a recording, a reconstruction. A story rebuilt from fragments and expectation, softened and reshaped every time you touch it. Vulnerable to a single suggestive word, capable of inventing whole events, and absolutely convinced of its own accuracy, even when it is wrong. How much of your life, then, are you sure about? Think of the argument you clearly won, that the other person remembers losing. You cannot both be right. Think of the childhood story your family tells so often that you can picture it, even though you were far too young to actually remember it. You are not recalling the event. You are recalling the telling. Think of the version of your past that shaped who you believe you are. Your sense of self is built on a foundation that is constantly, quietly being rewritten by the present. And maybe that is the strangest truth of all. Your memories are not a record of your life. They are your brain's ongoing attempt to make sense of your life, edited and re-edited to fit the person you are becoming. They are less like a documentary and more like a story you keep telling yourself, getting a little further from the facts with every chapter. It is not a flaw. A perfect, unchangeable memory would trap you in your past. The very thing that makes your memory unreliable is the thing that lets you grow, forgive, reinterpret, and move forward. You are not meant to hold the past exactly. You are meant to use it. So picture your earliest happy memory one more time. The birthday, the beach, the face leaning over your crib. It still feels real. It always will. But now you know what it truly is. Not a window into what happened, but quite possibly your mind's finest, most loving piece of fiction, written and rewritten just for you.